this was a book first, and how did this project get turned? Producer, writer, which came first? Who found the material and who found the writer?
I found the book. There was a kid in my office who had heard about the book, and he pitched me the one-line idea. You know, it was kind of a beautiful, kind of fragmented love story, coming of age, dealing with a kid who drinks too much and is probably R-rated. And I said, that's not what anyone's making. And I think it was literally like the weekend that Twilight it was like about to open or something like that. And I thought, well, geez, that's not what films are not being made that way. But then the next morning I was flying to New York, and at LAX there was the book sitting in a bookstore, and I thought it kind of was kismet. So I bought the book, really knowing just nothing other than just kind of the idea of what the story was, and I fell in love with it, and I landed, and I remember I called my office, said I have to make this into a film, and then it was, okay, we need a writer, and then we kind of submitted the book out to every studio, mini major and independent financier in town, and everybody passed. And it was a writer who was a brilliant book by Tim Tharp, who is a college professor in Oklahoma. I have to give credit to Jeremy Steckler, who was a young executive at Searchlight at the time, who said, what if we give it to Scott and Mike? And I knew Scott and Mike kind of socially, and I met them before, and they had written the script that I fell in love with, everybody else did too, called 500 Days of Summer. They read the book in 24 hours, which never happens, and they said, yeah, we want to do it. And so literally that took all of the onus off of me, because then the onus was on those guys.
The challenge here was that the novel is very much, it's a first-person narrative. It's very much from the perspective of this character, and you're in his head the whole time, and he's talking to you. And what's really beautiful about the book is that about halfway through, you start to realize that the way he sees himself isn't exactly the way everyone else sees him. And we just said, that's cool. How do we figure that out in screenplay form? And we didn't want to do a lot of voiceover, and we didn't want to do a lot of that kind of thing that would get in your way. So we just put it out there, hoping that someone awesome would come along and be able to film it in that way. So here we are. We're super excited the way it turned out. We had heard that Shailene was going into meetings, and that someone would say to Shailene,
right.
Have you read anything good? What do you like? And she'd be like, I read the script called The Spectacular Now that I loved. And when I heard that, when that got back to me, I was like, how do we meet her? Like, did you see The Descendants? We got to get on that. She's amazing. And that was really an important sort of thing, because it sort of got the ball back rolling. Like, people were like, what is this script? Shailene loves it. It must be good, and let's read it. And that helped get it off the table, because I think it had been on the shelf for a couple years, being like, oh, that's that thing that's never getting made.
I had heard of Tim's novel because it had been nominated for the National Book Award, but I hadn't read it. But I just never imagined that I would want to direct someone else's script. But I did read it, and it was the fastest thing I've ever read. They're fantastic writers, and what really blew me away was that Sutter, I had always been interested, you and I were talking before about the Apu films and the Antoine Doinel films from Truffaut, and I'd always wanted to write something that took place in high school that was vaguely autobiographical, but I could never quite wrap my head around it. And then the script presented itself, which really, Sutter was kind of me at that point in my life, and really what he's dealing with is a lot of what I was dealing with at that point. So when I met with them, what I presented them, I came in with, I think it was like a 60-page lookbook of exactly, because as you said, it really is a tightrope walk. There's just not very many films that are, teen film, quote-unquote teen film, is sort of a marginalized film ghetto, where you assume it's going to be adolescent, its value system, it's going to be about TNA, it's going to be going for low-hanging fruit. And there are, for me, so in that lookbook, sort of that really defined the tone and exactly what I was going for, it sort of connected the dots that I saw in what is a mature romantic R-rated drama, where the characters just happen to be teenagers, to other films like Last Picture Show and Splendor in the Grass and East of Eden and Rebel Without a Cause and Say Anything, some of the films of the 80s from Cameron Crowe. And then we were just I was very clear. I want to shoot this on anamorphic 35 millimeter. I want to shoot it in Athens, Georgia, where I'm from. The book takes place in Oklahoma. We talked about actors. And Shailene's interest in it really was also something that was profoundly exciting to me, because that was sort of a barometer for what the value system of the film would be, which is, her performance in The Descendants, to me, it just completely lacked any vanity and was a fiercely intelligent and brave performance, and she reminded me of like a young Deborah Winger or Sissy Spacek. So I was like, if we can sort of populate this film with an ensemble around her that's that good, we might have something.
They treated the characters like adults, and they weren't stereotyped into one certain category, and I don't know, it affected me when I read it. I cried when I read it. I laughed when I read it. And I knew a Sutter in high school, and I knew an Amy in high school. And my experiences in high school were similar to what a lot of these characters were going through. And
I felt, actually, there was a scene that doesn't make the movie, but when I kind of like take the microphone and it's just that very much like, look at me. There's a scene I'm at prom and we've been, making out, drinking a little bit, and I grab the microphone and I really just try and like DJ the prom and hey, what's up? And I think I even started like freestyle rapping about the Sutter man and this and that. And then I ended up getting kicked out. But that was that center of attention kind of thing. But what I was most excited about with this character was, because I've done a few party movies. I guess I've played kind of a charismatic, life of the party kind of guy before. But just all this stuff, like with my dad and with, especially once Kyle inhabited that person, that stuff was a lot of fun to shoot. But anything with Shailene was it was really easy. And I don't mean that in like a lack of, respect for the work or anything. But Shailene, I don't think either of us were necessarily trying to steer a scene at any given one, and it was just very natural. It's like a lot of the stuff, a lot of the, just little moments and the little improvisation we do, that's just because I think we were just right there.
I was expecting him to be like a quiet, introverted little soul like he was in Rabbit Hole. And that was not at all who Miles Teller is.
I think I just got back from Vegas.
Yeah. We had great conversations about Vegas and GMOs. And just had great chemistry.
We had a great lunch, and then after the lunch, Shailene talked to me about GMOs for literally probably 45 minutes, an hour, and I was taking it all in. I called my mom. I was like, Mom, do you know about this GMO thing? These are terrible for you. Something about corn, and it's just not as good as you think, Mom. So, check this out. But Shailene really enlightened me, which she continues to do every time we hang out.
It's not in the movie, but we did film some scenes where she has sort of a abusive, whether physically or not, but mentally abusive stepfather. And there's a scene where she sort of talks about kind of being molested as a 14-year-old by her stepbrother. And so there was a lot of things that didn't make the movie, but we did film that sort of laid heavily on Amy. And I never saw her as a victim to those things. I saw her as somebody who's like, okay, those things happened to me, and I'm going to continue moving forward. I'm going to climb this hill, and I'm going to get to the other side, and I'm going to get out of this town. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to eventually do it, even if it's in 10 years. And I think meeting Sutter was really important for her because he ultimately was the catalyst that made her stand up for her mom and made her move on with her life. But in our first meeting, I was like, if you see her as somebody different than that, then I'm not that girl, because I don't personally believe in being victims to our circumstances. And I definitely don't see that for her. And James was obviously in full agreement and opened my eyes to so many more things about her that I hadn't thought about. And I think that making that choice, now having watched it, sort of just added another layer to their relationship and the dimensions of their relationship, because even though she is, I always saw her as sort of a strong person, however quiet and shy, she never had the strength to fully stand up for what she believed in. And that's one thing that he helped her with, which I think is really profound. And even though the relationship is so incredibly toxic in a way and very unhealthy and breaks her down and breaks him down emotionally, I think it's kind of important for young adults to go through that process. I went through it when I was in high school, to sort of lose yourself in a way to someone else, because after you're finally finished with that little journey, you're able to go on your own journey and figure out who you are. And so at the end of the movie, I kind of think that that's where she is, whether, she takes him back or she doesn't, which is, everyone always wonders, what we think about that. But I think it's I hope that she's in a place where she's able to regain some of her own self-confidence from her own self-worth. Mm-hmm.